Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much. Welcome back to Ion Politics, and congratulations on your victory last month.
Well, thank you, Jack. It was an incredible election night, just breathtaking. Number one, nationally, the election results, Donald Trump being reelected. You look at the 7 battleground states, Trump won all 7. It was a very clear mandate from the voters. And here in Texas, as you know, I was Chuck Schumer and the Democrats' #1 target in the Senate. It was a $250 million race. And we ended up winning in a landslide. We won by 9 points. We won by 1 million votes statewide. And I'll tell you one of the things, Jack, I'm most excited about is that I carried the Hispanic vote statewide by 6 points. That is historic. And we saw in particular South Texas. The Rio Grande Valley has been a bright blue firewall for a century. And the valley flipped red. And that is a generational flip. I spend a lot of time down in the Rio Grande Valley. I've devoted a lot of energy, and I think that shift will make an enormous difference for Texas for a long, long time to come.
And so now the Republicans have the trifecta. They've
Yeah.
got the White House, they've got a majority in the Senate, they've got a very small majority in the House.
Yep.
The onus is on the Republicans to deliver what they
Yes.
promised. And so I'm wondering, what are your top priority pieces of legislation that Republicans need to get passed quickly?
Well, absolutely. We have a real obligation to deliver on our promises. And if you look at the election, there are a number of things that came out of the election that I think are a real mandate and a mandate for change. Number one, we will secure the border. I think Texans and people across the country are deeply dismayed with Joe Biden and the Democrats' open borders. We are going to see the border secure, and I don't believe it's going to take a year or even 6 months. I think it's going to happen in January and February of next year. We're going to see the numbers plummet because we're going to see on January 20th the return of a president who will enforce the law and will deport those who come in the country illegally. And we're going to see the numbers fall incredibly quickly. We're going to follow it up by having Congress pass legislation providing funding to ensure that we secure the border and keep our communities safe. So that's right at the top. I think also there is a clear mandate to get the economy moving, to get inflation under control. There are a lot of elements of that. One is reining in out of control spending from Washington, but another critical element of that is ending the Biden administration's war on energy and Texas oil and gas. And that also is going to end on January 20th. And we're going to see Texas and America become energy dominant. That's going to reduce prices, not just at the gas pump, but prices at the grocery store and prices that Texans and Americans are paying every day. We're also going to see a focus on safety and security, supporting law enforcement, getting violent criminal illegal aliens off the street. That will keep our families safer. And finally, when it comes to foreign policy and national security, you know, you think about it, when Trump was president last, we had peace and prosperity. We saw peace flowering in the Middle East. And Joe Biden and the Democrats came into office and they produced utter chaos, 2 major wars waging simultaneously across the globe. Both of those wars, I believe, will come to an end. Israel will defeat Hamas and we will return to peace and prosperity, because that's what happens when you have a strong commander-in-chief who our enemies are afraid of.
As you know, President-elect Trump has said that he's going to impose tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China on the first day he takes office on January 20th. Some economists have warned that tariffs, which are taxes on goods and services from foreign nations, could raise prices, and that will be passed along as all tax increases are passed along. And so I'm wondering, Texas is a big trade state. What concerns do you have about this, and what should people know?
Well, to be clear, Trump did not say he was going to raise tariffs. What he said is he would impose a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada unless they actively assist in stopping the illegal immigration at our open borders. And I got to say, the threat of tariffs, I don't think he is proposing this as an economic policy going forward. I think what he is doing with Canada and Mexico is using it as leverage to get their help in securing the borders. And I got to say, it's already producing results. We saw We saw Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada fly down to Mar-a-Lago and agree to work with him on securing the border. And we saw the president of Mexico commit that she too would work hand in hand. That is exactly how, in his first term, President Trump negotiated the Remain in Mexico agreement with Mexico. He threatened a tariff on Mexico. It brought them to the table. It got them to be partners. And it worked. It produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. So I don't expect these tariffs to go into effect because I think they are already having their intended purpose, which is to force Mexico and Canada to become active partners in solving this public safety and national security crisis that Texas and America are facing at our borders.
And you are going to be chairing now the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. What's your first priority as chairman?
My number one priority in the Senate is jobs, jobs, jobs. And the Senate Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over about 40% of the U.S. economy. So if you care about jobs in Texas, there are very few positions in all of government that have greater leverage to fight for Texas jobs than the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. And so my focus is going to be on unleashing investment and innovation. Right at the top of that list is going to be spectrum policy, moving more and more spectrum to the private sector because that unleashes billions of dollars of new investment. It creates tens of thousands of high-paying jobs. Space is going to be a major priority. We're seeing, again, tens of thousands of high-paying jobs in commercial space in Texas. It impacts Texas profoundly. Another major priority is going to be college athletics and NIL and the chaos that we're seeing in college athletics. We're going to take up and pass federal legislation to protect college athletics and ensure that it continues and continues strong going forward. And I will mention another major priority is going to be artificial intelligence. We've seen the Democrats wanting to put the government in charge of AI and set up a prior approval model. I got to say, Jack, that is a regime almost designed to ensure that America loses leadership in AI and cedes it to other countries. I don't think that's going to happen, and I'm going to work to ensure that America leads the world in AI innovation because that means jobs in Texas and all across the country.
Quick follow-up on the college athletics. What do you see the problem that needs to be solved?
Well, listen, the current situation is the Wild West, where you have, particularly with an open transfer portal, you have athletes jumping from school to school to school, you have diminished loyalty, and what you have is the rich get richer and everyone else loses. And if we keep going, I spend a lot of time, I spent much of last year listening to universities across Texas, listening to college conferences, listening to the NCAA, and the system right now, if it continues, is going to result in a few super programs, schools like UT and A&M and Michigan that will continue, and many of the other schools, we are at real risk of smaller schools, of Division II and Division III schools, losing their college athletics altogether. We are at real risk of non-revenue sports, women's sports, things other than football and basketball falling by the wayside. And listen, I got to say, college athletics has been an avenue that has brought thousands and thousands of young men and young women to college to get an education, to build a future. We need to make sure to protect it. So I've introduced legislation that would give the NCAA the authority to set rules of the road. It would protect the rights of athletes to get compensation. I think it's fair that you be compensated for the fruits of your labor. If you've developed incredible skills, you ought to be paid for that. But we also ought to have a system where you have real competition and fair competition. And I got to say, I'm optimistic that we will see bipartisan cooperation to come together and work to preserve the incredible institution we have of college athletics across the country.
As you know, Mark Swidden of Houston was released after being held in a China prison for, I think, a dozen years.
Yeah.
How did this all come about?
Well, it is a tremendous victory for America. Mark Swidden spent, as you said, 12 years unjustly detained in communist China in a Chinese prison in very rough conditions. Mark is from Houston. His mom, Catherine, she's from Luling, Texas. I've spoken with Catherine multiple times. I spent about 20 minutes today on the phone with Mark. In the Senate, I've been leading the fight to bring Mark home. I authored a resolution demanding China release him from prison. My resolution passed the Senate unanimously. It passed the House unanimously. For the past several years, I've been pressing Joe Biden and Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, to make freeing Mark Swadan a critical priority with China. And we saw this week China release 3 Americans, including Mark. Mark is now back in Texas. That is cause for celebration in Texas. People have been lifting him up in prayer. I told Mark today that Texans have been praying for him. His mom has been praying and fighting for him. And I told Catherine, Mark will come home, and I'm overjoyed that has happened now.
President-elect Trump has obviously nominated a lot of people to be in his cabinet. Do you have concerns about any of them as far as their past positions, their past actions, going forward?
Listen, I'm very excited by President Trump's cabinet nominees. I've met with many of them. I know most of them personally. I think it is an exceptionally strong slate of cabinet nominees, and I believe all of these cabinet nominees are going to be confirmed. I met today with Pam Bondi, whom President Trump has nominated to be Attorney General. I know Pam well. She's a good friend. She is a very experienced career prosecutor. She spent 18 years as a prosecutor. She spent 8 years as the elected Attorney General of Florida, the 3rd largest state in the country. Pam is a very talented, smart, serious lawyer. She takes very seriously the mandate from this election to restore integrity to the Department of Justice, to end the weaponization and the politicization that we've seen at the Department of Justice and the FBI under Joe Biden and the Democrats. And I got to say, across the board, I think the president has nominated strong leaders who are change agents. And I think this election, there is a mandate for change. There is a mandate for reform. The Senate will do its job. We'll have confirmation hearings. And I think there will be a handful of these nominees that Senate Democrats are incentivized to try to turn the hearings into a circus and throw as much muck at the wall as they can. But I believe at the end of the day, all these nominees will be confirmed.
And you're confident that they will be able to manage and lead these obviously large agencies?
I am. Now, listen, these are not easy tasks. As I said, I talked with Pam Bondi today about the challenges. Trying to restore integrity at the Department of Justice is not an easy task. There's been enormous damage done at DOJ and the FBI. I sat down yesterday and met with Pete Hegseth, who's been nominated to be the Secretary of Defense. Pete is a decorated combat veteran. He spent most of his adult life fighting for servicemen and women, fighting for veterans. And I think he's very clear-eyed about the need to reform the Department of Defense, and in particular to refocus on the core mission, to get back to supporting the warfighter, to get back to focusing on being prepared to defeat our enemies, and to put the politicized agenda of the last 4 years, the woke agenda that I think has done real damage to the Defense Department, to get rid of that political agenda and focus on the core mission. And Jack, one of the things I'm really excited about, I think we are going to see military enlistment rates skyrocket. We've seen them plummet under Joe Biden as many young men and women are saying, I don't want to go serve in the military if it is simply a place for social justice warriors to fight for their political agenda. I think getting back to supporting the war fighters, increasing lethality, being prepared to defeat our enemies, I think we're going to see a lot of young men and women saying, I want to serve, I want to protect America.
And what do you make of the allegations that have been swirling around Mr. Hegseth?
You know, I think most of them are efforts by the Democrats and the press to try to distract from the core mission. I mean, when we sat down and talked with Pete Hegseth, he was very focused on, look, the Department of Defense has gone off track. There's a reason enlistment numbers are plummeting, and it is not focused on, we are not as prepared as we need to be to defeat our enemies, whether our enemies are terrorists on a global stage or whether our enemies are communist China. You look at the risks, for example, of asymmetric warfare, and one of the challenges of the bureaucracy at the Defense Department is often they're fighting the last war and not the next war that we will face, and needing to move to next generation weapons systems, needing to invest, for example, in artificial intelligence and drones and hypersonics. I think Pete Hegseth is very focused on that task, which is why almost none of the Senate Democrats want to talk about any of the substance. most of the reporters, all they want to do is engage in these personal attacks. I got to say, it was particularly ridiculous this weekend when the New York Times breathlessly wrote a story about a private email from his mother while he was in the middle of a divorce proceeding. Now that nonsense has no business being in the middle of this, and I think it's an effort to really distract from the very important mission that he's been charged with, and that President Trump feels a burden to rebuild and restore our military.
And my last question to you is about a bill that you cared about, tried to carry through this term. What is the status of your bill on deepfake videos, which you showed when I interviewed you earlier in the year have really impacted a North Texas family in particular?
Yes. So look, I'm very optimistic. The legislation is called the Take It Down Act, and what it does is it makes it a criminal offense to release, to post non-consensual intimate images. And we have a pattern, number one, of someone who takes an intimate image of someone consensually, and then they get mad at them and they release it publicly in an effort at revenge. And it's a gross violation of privacy. We have a second permutation of this that we're seeing with artificial intelligence, where people are creating deep fakes. So you mentioned a North Texas teenager, Elliston Berry, who was 14. She was in 9th grade, and she woke up and a classmate of hers, a boy, had taken innocent pictures of her from social media, has used AI to make deep fakes that appeared to be naked pictures of her, and sent it to all of her classmates. And it's horrifying. Look, I'm the mother of 2 teenage girls. I'm the father of 2 teenage girls. I cannot imagine. I mean, she woke up in tears crying to her mother. That is wrong. The Take It Down Act, number one, makes it a criminal offense to post that content. But number two, critically, it puts a legal obligation on the tech platform to take that material down. Ellison spent 9 months trying to get Snapchat to pull these images down. My legislation would make it a legal requirement. It's bipartisan legislation. I teamed up with Democrat Amy Klobuchar. I am very optimistic. I think we have passed my legislation unanimously out of the Commerce Committee, and I think it is likely that we will pass it on the Senate floor. I hope this week, maybe even potentially tonight. We're trying to move it tonight, but I think we're going to get it done. We're going to get it signed into law, and it's going to be a critical protection for women and in particular for teenage girls who are often targeted by this kind of abuse.
We will leave it there. Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much as always. We appreciate your time.